Good evening, it's 8 o'clock and we are live from Studio One. On Tuesday, the House of Keys will elect the next Chief Minister for the Isle of Man. And joining us tonight are the two candidates in the running for the top job, our next Chief Minister. Hello and thank you for joining us. Tonight's programme is being filmed in front of a live studio audience who will be putting forward a number of questions for our candidates. If you're on Twitter, then you can tweet the programme using the hashtag #ChiefMinLive. So let's meet the two MHKs who will be on the ballot paper this Tuesday. Elected as one of the MHKs for Ramsey in 2016, he served in a number of roles during the last administration, and he's the current Minister for Education, Sport and Culture, Dr. Allinson, MHK. Following in the footsteps of his father David, our next candidate was first elected to the House of Keys in 2011. He has since been re-elected on 2 occasions as one of the 2 MHKs for Aaron Michael. He's the current Treasury Minister, Alfred Cannan, MHK. So before we start with questions, let's hear from each candidate and find out a little more about their plan for the next 5 years if they're successful in being elected our next Chief Minister. And first up, we have Dr. Allinson.
Thank you very much, Richard, and good evening, everyone. I'm very, very proud to have been returned by the people of Ramsey to be their representative in the House of Keys in the recent general election, and also very privileged to be able to stand here before you tonight as a candidate for Chief Minister. Why am I standing? I think this is a pivotal moment for our nation. I'm sure all chief ministers or aspiring chief ministers have said that in the past, but we are still in a global pandemic. We are still dealing with a number of crises as we head into winter. We know that the cold winds of winter will cause problems in terms of fuel prices, in terms of food shortages, and we need to have a reactive government that can deal with these. The last 18 months have shone a spotlight on some of the inequalities within our society, and I think it is absolutely essential that the next administration grasps these challenges to actually make sure that we deal with some of the social problems we've witnessed, but also that we move forward together, whether that's through tackling climate change, whether that's through tackling intergenerational fairness, whether that's through growing the active population, but particularly that the next administration invests in the infrastructure for our nation so that we can benefit all, not just the few. The election for Chief Minister obviously will be taking place on Tuesday by representatives from the House of Keys, but I'm very grateful to Studio One for putting on this public hustings so that we can take questions from the audience and so that we can involve the whole population in terms of this election. Because whoever gets in as Chief Minister has to take with them not only members of the House of Keys, not only form a new administration, but also react, listen, and actually take along with them the people of this great nation. So I'm looking forward to some good questions tonight, looking forward to the election on Tuesday, and also looking forward to the ongoing interaction between the elected members of the House of Keys, Tynwald, and the people who put us there to serve them. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Allinson. And now, Alfred Cannan.
Well, good evening. I wish I could tell you that this small but strong nation of ours was immune to the international impacts of disease, climate change, gas shortages, food supply, inflation, healthcare delivery, and global taxation agendas. But we are not. And we can see all of these big international issues now in real time on the island, from COVID to climate change, from housing to healthcare, from energy to the environment. But big issues do not need and mean big government. It needs defined government, it needs targeted government, it needs listening government, and it needs accountable government. That is why in my manifesto for this role, I have set out some proposed initiatives to help enhance strategy and policy decisions, which include the need for every minister to report annually to the public and Tynwald with a report on post-year delivery and also with their future intentions. They also include a commitment for an annual debate and an island plan debate in Tynwald, and for a proposal for government and public interaction and to hear public views on key issues. That is why I've also set out in the manifesto how government could and should work more cohesively across departments to deliver the services that we need in a better, more focused way, learning from the experiences of COVID as to how policy and strategy can be formulated and delivered quickly and efficiently through cross-government action. But a government should not just listen to itself. So much more value can be brought by a willingness to examine and scrutinise delivery, and that is why I have outlined in the manifesto a proposal for more community-based individuals to undertake independent advisory roles, to provide strategic oversight and enhance decision-making at the senior levels of government. So much expertise in our community is potentially wasted. In terms of priorities, economic growth and job creation clearly remain at the forefront of providing us with the security that we need to maintain and improve our island home. But current economic conditions, including inflationary pressures and energy costs, will provide a significant challenge for the next administration. Throughout my tenure as Treasury Minister, I've sought to react to the austerity policies that were causing so much damage when I came into office in 2016. And I have endeavoured to put budgets and create budgets that put families first. I've increased personal tax allowances, putting us ahead, not behind, of our UK counterparts, increased vital benefits such as child allowance to help support hard-working families, and increased preschool credit values to bring more support to young parents, and taken bold decisions, such as that to write off £95 million of the MUA debt to stabilise our utility bills. We must continue to put people first, and Tynwald must rise not only to meet the challenges, but to deliver on our opportunities. I'm looking for a government that creates and delivers on the ground and to the front line and contributes to the future success of our island. That is the framework my manifesto sets out. That's what I'm seeking to deliver through an inclusive and collegiate leadership, and that's what is needed to build a secure, vibrant and sustainable island for the future.
Thank you, Alfred Cannan. And now to questions from the audience. And our first question is from David Cowan, who is a student. David, your question, please.
Good evening. Do you believe that there is a lack of accountability in government? And if so, how do you think that it should be dealt with?
Okay, I'll address that to Dr. Allinson first, please.
Thanks very much for the question, David. Lack of accountability. I think there should be more accountability. I don't think there's a complete lack. When you say in terms of the government, I think there are two aspects to that. You've got elected politicians and the way they interact, both with their constituents and with the government as a whole, and also with Tynwald in terms of answering questions. And then you've got behind them the civil service, which is meant to implement the policies and strategies agreed by Tynwald. I think politicians as a whole are accountable. However, I think there has been a deficit in terms of the lines of communication, particularly using the media, which is why I'm quite happy to join the session tonight. At the start of the last administration, we had the Paradise Papers, and ever since then, the role of the interaction between government and the media seemed to go astray. I think we need to reset that. We need to use the media both to convey messages, but also get feedback from people in our society. So there's that side of accountability. The other side is obviously with the civil service and the way that they should be accountable for providing the outcomes that government want and that have been agreed by Tynwald and our constituents. And I think there we need to make sure that we have clear lines of accountability from chief executive officers upwards to the chief secretary, that is done in an open and transparent way, so that when key projects aren't delivered on time, there is an explanation for that. There is a clear apology if necessary, but there's an explanation for that. And I think if we can embed that culture of honesty and openness and reinvent that, I think we'll go an awful lot further in terms of rebuilding some of the trust, both within Tynwald and between government and our community, because that trust is essential for good governance as we move forward.
Thank you. Alf Cannan?
Yeah, there's clearly a lack of accountability, but I think it runs deeper than that. And I think this also comes to how we actually shape our policy and talk about our delivery in a more open and transparent way. So the manifesto that I've set out includes actions that I believe will enhance accountability. That's why in my opening remarks and in my manifesto, I've clearly stated that every minister will turn up in Tynwald at least once a year with a full report and appraisal on their achievements with their department over that year, but also outline the future strategy. That will give the public and Tynwald a chance to express both its frustrations, but also acknowledge where things have gone right, and I think better contribute to how government is delivering its services. So that's one step that can be taken. The second step, which I've set out in the manifesto, is for government to hold annually a conference, presumably in the Villa Marina as the ideal location, where over a couple of days it can talk about the key issues, talk about its plans, engage, though most importantly, with the public face-to-face to both explain what is going on and to hear the reaction and the feedback. And the third critical where I think we can improve in terms of our accountability is by looking at government being brave enough to take skilled, unconflicted individuals from the community and put them into the heart of the policy and decision-making process, to sit alongside ministers, to challenge the strategy and delivery options that are being placed in front of them. And I think that too will help enhance the accountability of government.
Thank you. Gentlemen, I think a lot of people's frustrations comes from lack of accountability for senior civil servants, for example. How can we address this? Do we need to put them on fixed-term performance-related contracts? Do we need a more robust appraisal process? Do we need to stop the instances of individuals being parachuted into senior positions without a competitive recruitment process? Alf, Cannan, how would you respond to that?
Well, I think you can't just blame all failings on the civil service, and you have to take responsibility politically if government is not delivering.
But you can get voted out after 5 years. What about the civil service?
Absolutely. I think again, there are improvements that can be made, I am sure, both around the actual direct accountability, direct performance appraisal for senior civil servants. But actually, this really comes down to a strength of political will to deliver and the right framework to deliver. And again, in the manifesto, I've really set out to directly address this by saying that we need a new policy and strategy unit at the heart of government with the political will behind it to ensure that we are working together across government, that we are meeting our objectives, that we are setting cohesive policy, but most importantly, that we are prepared to work together to ensure that we are delivering on the ground. There have been far too many occasions when we've all known that things are going wrong, but we've just left individuals to either get on with the job or continue to conduct business in such a way where we can clearly see that delivery is not happening. That needs to change, and we can do that by enhanced policy and strategy, cohesive delivery, and that can be done by creating this unit, but also having the political will to work together across government.
Okay, thank you. Alex Allinson?
As somebody who was parachuted into the Department of Education, Sport and Culture last year to sort out issues with management, I agree with you. In terms of CEOs, there needs to be a fixed-term appointment there. There needs to be far better appraisal there. It is not healthy to have the same person in a senior job in a department for 10, 15 years, unaccountable. We need to bring in that culture of openness right the way across government. It does concern me that Minister Cannan's keen on bringing in people into unelected roles within government. What I do not want the Isle of Man to develop is a chumocracy where people are parachuted in to make serious strategy and policy decisions which should be decided by Tynwald, which have to be done in a democratic way. And I think that in terms of that accountability, that needs to start from the bottom. I don't want to wait a whole year to question a minister about their overperformance or underperformance. We need that constant dialogue, both in terms of within Tynwald and the democratic process, but also with the public as well, because we need to rebuild that trust. And your question obviously shows that some of that trust is lacking.
Okay, thank you. Any comments from the audience at this point? David Cowan, any further comment to your question?
No, brilliant, thank you.
Okay, no problem, thank you. We shall move on in that instance. And the next question is from Bill Mummery, who's here representing the Chamber of Commerce. Bill, your question, please.
Availability, the cost, and the suitability of housing, both for our local citizens and for skilled expatriates that we need to grow our economy, has always been a problem. It's been exacerbated through COVID-19, including increases in homelessness and, sadly, domestic violence. How would you gentlemen go about addressing this fundamental issue?
Thank you, Bill. Alf Cannan?
Yeah, well, thank you very much. Again, Bill, it's one of those issues that I've clearly highlighted in my manifesto and clearly set out that we need a housing and communities minister now, particularly assigned to get on with solving this critical issue that has been created, post-COVID and potentially as a result of our successes with our economy. If you go back 5 years, when I first came in as Treasury Minister, in fact, the big problem was that potentially people were leaving the island and that we had hundreds of houses for sale across the island, and we were coming off the back of austerity policies that were causing significant problems. Now we've got the reverse situation. So we need to pull housing out of its position in the Department of Infrastructure. We need to bring it to light. We need to create the policy and work on the decision-making process around what is actually going to resolve these critical issues. And there's a multi-layered approach to delivering it, but it's a vital issue, and it's vital that we get on and tackle that. And the point that I was making about having and engaging with skilled experts in the community, there will be people who are non-conflicted, who will be able to bring this sort of experience. And so it concerns me when I hear that government shouldn't change, that we shouldn't engage more with expertise in the community, that we shouldn't be brave enough to start taking a step to bring forward skilled expertise, to start delivering not just the policies, because the policies are shaped in Tynwald, and it's clear that Tynwald will want a resolution on this. But it is absolutely clear that in putting together the strategy and proposals that we draw on that type of expertise to deliver. And when it comes to housing, when it comes to communities, we now need to dust this out of the DOI who need a complete restructure. And we need to bring it to light and bring it to life with a new Housing and Communities Minister.
Thank you. Dr. Allinson?
Thanks very much. And thank you for your question, Bill. I mean, in terms of your starting question about homelessness and domestic abuse, because domestic abuse, we know, is a major cause of homelessness. I think it's about time that the Isle of Man government had a statutory obligation to house people who are homeless. We should not have to rely on GRI, although they do fantastic work, to have a night shelter for homeless people on our island. So that needs to be addressed through urgent legislation. In terms of how we deal with affordable housing, whether that be in the rental sector or the residential sector with people buying, that is a multifaceted project that needs to be brought forward. We need to work with local authorities so that they can build more homes to provide through social housing. We also need to turbocharge what the DOI have already been doing in terms of mid-rents, so that people can actually rent accommodation but still save for a deposit and then move on. And when they do move on, we need to revamp the first buyer scheme so that the margins there are set much more ambitious, so that people can earn more but also spend more on a house with a mortgage deposit guarantee scheme provided by government. At the end of the day, we want to grow the active population of this island. We have to grow the active population of this island if we're going to tackle some of the demographic crises that not only affect us but many developed nations. And to do that, we will need to build more houses. But that housing strategy has to be linked with planning as well. We cannot just build on greenfield sites all the time. We have to be inventive in terms of revigorating our inner city areas, perhaps transferring those properties that are currently used for office space that people don't need anymore because they're working from home into far more affordable residential areas and residential space as well. So there's a whole range of things we can do, but we need to do that as a coherent policy and really try to provide accommodation for those people on the Isle of Man who need it, but also, as you said, for those people, particularly key workers who need to attract to the island to provide the social services we depend upon.
Thank you. Bill, any further comment?
Only to ask very briefly, supplementary, of our 100% of our housing stock, there are three components. There's direct public housing, there is ownership, and there is private sector rental. Do you feel that that balance needs to be revisited as to those components?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is multifaceted. There are a number of areas. what we need to do is first of all, we actually need to understand what is going on in the housing sector, because there's lots of anecdotal evidence, lots of rumours that big investment companies are buying. If that's the truth, then we need to get action to stop that. We need to ensure that our residents, our first-time buyers, our young people have the relevant opportunity. So that type of activity needs to be stopped. But we also need to recognise that the state interfering in the free market, which it needs to do sometimes, just to either temper things or to ensure that the market is delivering for the greater interests of society, is not unduly damaged. And rentals, for example, remain a vital part of our life, of our offering here on the island. So we also need to be careful that we don't inadvertently damage that part of the market as well. We need to take the evidence, but we also need to act. There is absolutely a need now to start building and to release land if it's feasible, brownfield sites. There may be actions for the government to undertake in that respect. But we also need to ensure that we are delivering cohesive policy in that respect. And as I said, that's why we've got to dust these things down from the current structures and reinvigorate government with some new structures, some new cross-government working, and that will lead, I think, to the better decisions and delivery mechanisms that we need and address some of those questions that you're asking.
Thank you. Dr. Allinson?
Yes, I mean, in terms of the rental sector, I think we have developed an over-reliance and a culture that sets ownership as the key aim for everyone. I think we need to recognise that many other European countries, their rental sector, private rental sector, is far bigger. And actually, if we're going to attract people over here as a tester of the Isle of Man, that needs to be available to them. So I think the mid-rent scheme that the DOI have proposed, using commissioners' houses as well on the fixed-term tenancies and getting people moving around a little bit more is a very good thing in terms of reinvigorating the rental sector. The other key thing, though, is looking at the Manx Development Corporation and how they can actually use new initiatives such as rent-to-buy schemes and actually manage to provide a real choice for people. The Landlord Registration Act that's now gone through is the first step towards raising the bar in terms of the private rental sector, making sure they're of a good quality, but we need to do further in terms of deposit guarantee schemes and also secure tenancies for people. But if we're going to attract people to our island, and we must do that, and we're going to retain people on our island, and again, we must do that, we need to make sure that the government works with the private sector and the third sector to provide adequate housing for all the people on our island.
Thank you. Should government be actively promoting, as it does now, the fact that you can invest in property if you're an off-island investor with no restriction?
I think we need to be very careful about that. I mean, again, as Minister Cannan said, there is anecdotal evidence of people buying up properties here and causing a housing bubble, which we're living through at the moment. I've talked to the DfE, I've talked to the registry, and that speculating in the Isle of Man property market, that government steps in and tries to control that. We've seen it, particularly New Zealand,
that I've given, and the consideration to the level of action that will be needed. Should the evidence be present that that type of activity is taking place on our island, the government must act responsibly in the greater interest to ensure that we look after our residents, but also do so in a way that we don't discourage economic growth on the island.
Okay, thank you. I just want to come to a couple of questions, just moving on a little bit to climate change. Which candidate is going to building an onshore wind farm Alfred?
Well, I've clearly identified in my manifesto that climate change is a priority. for this island. It wasn't in Alex's manifesto, so it's hard to understand where he sits on this particular issue. But this comes down to the island setting out, in my view, the need now within the next 12 months, set out a clear roadmap to what it regards as its future energy security and future energy policy, determining exactly what we want from our renewable energy supply and how we want it to deliver. There is a fantastic opportunity at the moment, I think, for the island to look seriously at having its resilience enhanced by having its own energy supply, and we need to determine exactly how we can do that in a cost-effective way. We also need to set out, I believe, the right roadmap towards achieving that, one that is costed, so that we can properly understand the impacts on our community from achieving those goals. So whether it is onshore wind, whether it's offshore wind, whether it is tidal, whether it is solar, or whether and how reliance on interconnectors are brought forward, it's absolutely a key priority of mine to make sure that roadmap is delivered and that the island has a proper understanding of what we need to do in the journey that we're on to deliver on our promises for climate.
Going to move to the question from the audience now, and it's from Debbie Holzall, who's here representing Unite. Debbie, your question, please.
I'd just like to ask both of you, in your ministerial position that you've had, what did you feel that you succeeded very well and was very proactive in doing before COVID? And how will you address the working poor situation on the Isle of Man if you were successful in the Chief Minister's post?
Dr. Allinson?
Sorry, it was the worker pool, was it?
Sorry?
The worker pool.
Who were?
Oh, the working poor. I beg your pardon. So first of all, in terms of me as a minister before COVID, I had about 3 weeks until when I was brought into the Department for Education, Sport and Culture. It was quite obvious that listening to the workers, particularly the teaching profession, had gone astray, that the leadership had lost the trust of the people who were working in the education service. And one of my first roles was to meet with all the union representatives, introduce myself and say, I am here to listen to you. And I think we have managed to start correcting some of those cultural divides which were inherent in that department and which caused the loss of trust and a vote of no confidence, both in the minister and the entire senior executive of the department. Incorporating the voice of both employees and their representatives is key to driving this nation forward. In terms of the working poor, again, there are various aspects to that. You've got the whole idea of 0 hours contracts and employment rights. I think one of the times that we met when you'd first come into your post was at a committee that was set up by the Chief Minister to look into 0 hours contracts. The number of 0 hours contracts on the Isle of Man is relatively low at the moment, but what became quite evident was our employment law is completely deficient. Employees didn't understand it, employers didn't understand it, even more worrying. So we need to urgently update our employment law to provide secure employment rights for all people, but also to address things like maternity, shared paternity benefits, sickness benefit, bereavement benefits, bereavement leave. We have to have that full gamut, because not only does that protect the rights of workers here, but also will attract people from elsewhere to come and work here. This should be the best place to work, the best place to bring up your children. In terms of then increasing earnings for people and increase the money they've got in their pocket, we have to align the minimum wage with the living wage. We have to make sure that benefits are aligned with the cost of living as well. And we have to urgently look at things like child benefit and the EPA, Employed Persons Allowance, to make sure that everyone isn't just making do, but everyone has a chance to prosper on this island and do better for themselves and their families. Thank you.
Thank you. Alf Cannan?
Well, when I came into my position in 2016, 5 years ago as Treasury Minister, the critical issue on the doorstep then, and now becoming very apparent again, really was this cost of living crisis, I think driven by 5 years of austerity policies that really had not in any way benefited society. That's why one of the very first budgets that we did raised significantly the personal allowances, the single biggest rise in personal allowances in living memory, some £2,000 increase in personal allowances. That's why we continue to raise personal allowances throughout the course of the administration, to give people better opportunities, to allow them to earn more money tax-free. That's why also we increased targeted benefits such as child benefit, 15% rise over the lifetime of this administration, to really help low to middle income families with the support mechanisms, and a number of targeted benefit fitted increases hard on things like EPA to make sure that it is suitable for those on lower incomes, to help support them back in to work. And I'm proud of the fact that we've got the lowest rates of unemployment for 20 years. And in fact, leading up to COVID, had embarked on a program of targeted support, but also targeted investment to increase the opportunities on the islands for business and for workers. And of course, during the COVID period, it did fall to the Treasury to lead and deliver a package of measures that really did protect our working families in so many different ways. But the best thing that we can do to continue that is to ensure that our economy is strong, that we create the diversity of opportunities in so many areas, but more importantly, that our education and training opportunities give people the opportunity to enhance their lifestyles, to enhance their earnings, to train into different areas, to bring more value to them and their employers. But also we need to make sure, of course, that our welfare is appropriate. I've acknowledged that there are areas now that the government needs to review. There is a review of national insurance underway, that we will be discussing the national insurance scheme and benefits over the coming year, and things like, for example, maternity benefit needs to be examined incredibly carefully. But benefits need to be proportional. They do need to be aligned more to the cost of living. But our biggest thing that we can do is to make sure that our economy is strong, that there are job opportunities for our people, that everybody is receiving the best education that we can give them. And so there really is a number of interlinking
You are losing people in the droves. So you have to commit, and you have to make that good commitment to actually keep the young people here, to make sure there is housing affordable for them, pull them out of a benefit situation because they are topping their actual earnings with a benefit at the side. And I think what I would love to hear from you as prospective chief ministers is that you go out and you speak to these people, because you have certainly not got your finger on the pulse from where I stand.
Okay, thank you, Debbie. We're going to move on to the next question now, and this is from Catherine Harmon from Think Tank. Catherine, your question, please.
Hi. Over 75% of respondents to the recent survey identified that the recruitment of suitably experienced and/or qualified staff, both on island and off island, is a concern at the moment for their business. How do you propose to tackle this apparent recruitment crisis?
Thank you. Alex Allinson.
Yeah, I mean, we've already been talking about the standard of living here, and just increasing tax thresholds doesn't help the low paid. So we need to make sure we have a decent, vibrant economy that can provide those well-paid jobs for people. Also, unemployment and underemployment are very important concepts. Yes, we have very low unemployment, but we do have people who have to do 2 or 3 jobs to make ends meet. In terms of attracting those people, the key skills we need to our island, I think, again, it's looking at a whole range of issues. We've talked about housing, whether that be residential and people buying a house, or the option of renting somewhere. In terms of the Department of Education, Sport and Culture, we offer a range of incentives for people to come to our island who are highly skilled first couple of years. We will also write off their tuition fees if they stay here and work on the island. So there's a range of financial incentives we can do there. I think the Isle of Man government, though, relatively reticent about actually saying how good this place can be to come and work. So one of the things with Locate IM is actually targeting those key skills we need, whether they be in the health service, service, whether they be in the private sector in terms of IT, whether they be in education, to go out and bring people here to look at our island, to work here. So we need those jobs, we need that housing, but we need the full package if we're going to attract those people with skills who are in demand all over the world.
And then there's going to be a really serious issue. It's not just for government and for young people, but that's more broadly for business in terms of how they develop and consider what they need to do when they're considering business growth. And you will know now that the vacancies indicators coming through from the job centre are also significant in terms of the demand across industries. So sorting out our housing now needs to be a critical issue. Sorting out our internal infrastructure, getting to give confidence to business that we are acting on these matters and that we are going to get these addressed in a timely manner will be absolutely imperative, I think, to building for the future. And then behind that, of course, we need to be ensuring that we've got a new economic plan or strategy being delivered now at the moment. We're going to need to carefully analyse that. But there are other things that we can consider as well and need to deliver on, including ensuring that we've got the right digital infrastructure in place to give people confidence that coming to this island will be an enabler for them and the businesses that they're coming to succeed in the future. And that also, if they're coming into more domestic sectors for the island, that we have a strong plan, a strong delivery plan to ensure that those sectors in the future deliver. Shaping an island plan, one of the visions and views that I have in terms of helping improve our domestic sector is potentially bringing forward an initiative like a year of sport in 2023 to help drive that domestic economy. That in turn will also give people coming to the island confidence that there will be a future for them in terms of their jobs and that we've got sustainable plans and businesses for the long term.
Thank you. Any further comments, Catherine?
Just one. We've talked a lot so far tonight about how to make the island an attractive place to live and to keep workers to stay here. We've talked about housing as a big issue. How do you both factor in higher education funding and costs as a reason for why families might want to leave the island and students might not want to return?
Allinson.
Over to me, Education Minister, because we had a review of student awards. And hopefully we'll be coming to Tynwald in October, November with a revised scheme. When you look at the education funding here, we actually offer far more to families than we do in the UK. But talking, for instance, to consultants at Noble's Hospital, one of the key reasons they came here in the past was that we actually didn't charge tuition fees, several years ago. I think we need to look at the entire package of education, the way we offer it to people, so that we can incentivise them to come over here, put their kids through education here, and then if they need to go across, that they can go to universities and that can be funded. We've managed to make sure that people going to some of the Russell Group are now charged home fees. So we're breaking down some of those barriers that previously existed from coming to the Isle of Man. But again, if we're going to attract people here, we need a world-class education system. We need that extra investment in our schools right the way through, from preschool to primary, secondary, and then tertiary education. The work that's currently being done at UCM to provide on-island courses or access to distance courses that people can study on island but not have to travel across makes this a really good place to come and have a family and allow them to grow up. But I think it is the fundamental right of graduates, if they want to leave this island and pursue a career overseas, that they do so. What we need to do, though, is see why they won't come back. And a lot of the reasons, actually, when Treasury have looked into them, are because the jobs just aren't here for them. So we need to create those jobs here so that we can entice them back. But we need to have the right pay and conditions, whether that be accommodation, the actual salary they get, or some of the national insurance holiday schemes we've had to entice them to come back.
Cannan?
Yeah, and it was my pleasure as part of the Economic Recovery Group that I set up to sort of lead on the economic recovery to seek to create 1,000 new training opportunities across this island, and it was great to see some enhanced initiatives around graduate internships and expand some of those schemes, but also put in new schemes such as the Learning Company up at UCM to give people the ability to interact more with businesses, to establish and build those relationships, but also understand what they might need to do as returning graduates to come and fit into the island and where those availability of those roles might be. In terms of what we're offering our graduates, I mean, I think broadly, we have a different structure. Of course, they get loans in the UK, and over here we broadly pay for graduate education, except for a small amount of loan money that is requested. But broadly, the bulk is paid for, and I think, as Alex has said, about 40-50% of our graduates do return. We need to make sure that when they do come back, the incentives are there, not just the infrastructure around them, but we can look at other financial incentives, and we've got a graduate scheme running at the moment where we are helping, where specialist graduates are being brought to the island, where we're helping pay for their first year salary, and we can also look at other incentives around employers and employees' national insurance, for example. So that whole package as a whole is vital to make sure that we are encouraging graduates to our island and keeping them here as well.
Thank you. Just had a comment in on Twitter in reaction to your question, Catherine, and this is from Annette. Why should they move here when public services are better funded and supported in the UK? So we shall move on. Time is pressing. So the next question is from Jennifer Horton, who's here representing the Institute of Directors. Jennifer, can we have your question, please?
Thank you, Richard. And a question for the future Chief Minister. Although the Isle of Man doesn't feature prominently in the recent Pandora Papers, do you see the increasing focus on the global tax and regulatory authorities, on the likes of the Crown dependencies, as one of the biggest threats to the Isle of Man businesses and the economy? And if so, what can we do to reduce the threat to the island, either internally with policy change or externally with dialogue with the UK and elsewhere?
Thank you, Jennifer. Alf Cannan,
I've said in my manifesto, Jennifer, that sort of international relations are one of the key requirements for a future Chief Minister, but of course you have to balance that without losing the focus on delivery on our domestic agenda. I think we've worked as an island incredibly hard over the last decade or so in terms of building these relationships now, in terms of looking for progress, particularly with our financial services industry, in terms of moving away from the old reputation as a tax haven and moving now to a responsible agenda as an international business centre. We've tackled some of the big issues on base erosion, profit shifting and substance. We've worked with the OECD, we've worked with Westminster, we've talked about and delivering on an open register of beneficial ownership. We need to keep working with the international community to ensure that we are delivering on expectations. But we also need to ensure that we are standing our ground where appropriate. We don't need to bend over every single time there is a whiff of a problem in the air, but we do need to consider how we might responsibly react, if at all that is needed. So I'm actually very supportive of the position that we are in. The latest move for the 15% headline rate will be brought in, I am sure, on the island. We will commit to that, but that impact will affect one or two very, very top-end businesses on the island, and we will continue with our current structure of income tax. So my commitment will be to work carefully and closely with international partners to build those relationships, to understand the direction of travel and to act responsibly as an island to make sure that we have a sustainable economy for the future.
Thank you. Dr. Allinson?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of the old mud that was always slung at us that we were a tax haven, I'd hope that those days are gone, because a lot of this, this administration that we've just finished with, a lot of the things that they've been doing in terms of beneficial ownership, in terms of tax transparency, have gone a long way to try to correct those. The signing up, we're one of the 136 countries to sign up to the new OECD a platform. Pillar 1 will deal with those corporations with worldwide turnover of 20 billion. That's probably not going to affect an awful lot of companies here. And Pillar 2 looks at those with a net profit of 250 million euros. So it's not going to affect a lot of the small and medium-sized businesses that actually are the heart of our economy. And what it will do, though, is put us on a level playing field with a lot of our competitors. British Virgin Islands have signed up. Liechtenstein, Luxembourg, Switzerland have all signed up. So I think that some of the tax regulations that are coming in actually give us a bit of an advantage, because we can use some of the things that we have on our island to actually attract businesses over here on a level playing field. I mean, we talked a little bit beforehand about climate change. It's not in my statement, because the climate change pathway is set out in the Climate Change Act that's been passed by Tynwald. What we need to do is actually deliver on that, so we can attract those companies that want the green credentials by supplying them with 100% green energy. We can attract those people who want to live here with affordable housing, with decent education and a health service, and a beautiful countryside that they can enjoy. That is how we break down these barriers to be seen just as a bit of a tax haven. The days, unfortunately, of people arriving with a suitcase of money are well gone, and if they do arrive at the sea terminal, they're normally picked up by the police fairly quickly. Thank you.
Alf Cannan, over the past 5 years, how do you think the island's reputation has it grown, or do you think it's fallen back somewhat? How are we perceived by international bodies at the moment?
Oh, I do perceive the island's reputation as having grown. You know, as I said, we've committed all the way to the international agenda. I think more recently our open commitment to an open register of beneficial ownership will further enhance our standing, and we do not want to shy away from agendas around transparency, particularly in money laundering and crime when it comes to the island. So we've made a huge amount of progress in that respect. And I think our financial services community have stood up incredibly well to the pressures, have reacted maturely and sensibly, and have reshaped and redesigned their business. And when it comes particularly to the substance regulations, which now mean the days of the brass plaque are really truly coming to an end, actually it's been a benefit to the island. That's why the Economic Recovery Group's move to commission and properly analyse our economic base and our economic strengths at the moment, but also look at where we can find our future opportunities is the right thing to do, and why that the government must take seriously and look seriously at the recommendations to ensure that we build a strong international outward-looking island with opportunities to develop careers and opportunities to develop new businesses seriously. We must take that seriously and translate that into real action.
Thank you. Dr. Allinson?
I mean, when I first moved over here, we featured in an episode of The Sopranos where Tony Soprano needed to launder some money, and he took it through the Isle of Man, and apparently it was absolutely clean by the time we finished with it. Those days are over. But what we do have, and what we need to keep on developing and keep on attracting, is a really diversified economy, whether that be digital, whether that be manufacturing, whether that be tourism, whether that be IT, and everything that comes along with it. Because all the ancillary jobs that come along in terms of banking, in terms of finance, feed our economy. Again, what we need to be absolutely certain of as we try to attract new businesses here is that we also cherish and foster the businesses that are already here in the first place. We mustn't actually lose sight of some of the great companies we've got here who've actually sustained our economy right the way through COVID, and will continue employing people and training them. But as we move more to a knowledge-based economy, the role of education and lifelong learning will be more important than ever. And for those new companies that come here with their skills gaps, we have the opportunity of providing that education, providing those qualifications, providing that training here for those companies to attract not only them, but their staff to stay here and actually make it their home.
Thank you. Anything to add, Jennifer? Thank you. Our next question now is from Neil Mellon from the Isle of Man Food Bank. Neil, your question, please.
Thank you. Gentlemen, many third sector organisations have seen a massive months. They're now preparing for what might be the perfect storm. You've already mentioned rising costs of heat and fuels, the rising costs of transport fuel, costs of food and goods in general, all coupled with potential reduction of supply.
Alf Cannan.
Also in my opening remarks this evening, and they are critical issues. So, the first thing is that government does need to consider how it is supporting those people across our community we recognise as exposed, more exposed perhaps than others to committee report that was delivered by Tynwald in June brings forward some valuable suggestions. Government has committed to many of those suggestions. I think it's important that we get on and deliver that, but also important that we continue to make sure that this issue is discussed in an open and transparent
I would like to see In the same way as we've had an economic regeneration plan, we need a mental health regeneration plan. We need self-harm and long-term unemployment as well. So we need to invest not only in our economy, but also in the mind.
Policies and procedures you either have to use or introduce in the future, that whatever happens, the children investigated, the suspension should not result in children missing out on some of the benefits, such as free school.
Some families on free school meals.
Across government, and that's why I've said in the manifesto that we need to work off a central policy and strategy unit that is delivering on Tynwald's wishes, but is also ensuring that we get the priorities right, but we work more closely with our community in a variety of different ways.
Yeah, in answer to that question, I don't think it's a matter of having isolated funds, whether it's COVID recovery or poverty. I think what the pandemic has shown is we need departments right across government to work together to provide solutions for what can often be complex issues. Poverty is not just Treasury, it's not just Department of Health and Social Care, it's not just education, it's everyone's issue. And we need a set budget to deal with poverty in the same way as we need a set budget to deal with mental health. What I am concerned about by Minister Cannan's comments is the centralisation of power within the Cabinet Office, because what we need to do is actually have very much a democratic mandate from Tynwald and an openness to deal with these problems right across government, rather than having the silo mentality that unfortunately has persisted. And what we need to do is break that down so we deliver the outcomes that people not only demand, but they deserve on this island, whether that be trying to end poverty, provide affordable housing, or deal with mental health issues.
But Alex, things need to change. You can't just carry on with the same structures that you're proposing.
But centralising more and more power within the Cabinet Office is not change.
I'm not talking about centralising power. I'm creating a much better one government that delivers across, that cohesively gets on top of the policy issues. COVID taught us, one of the great things with the Economic Recovery Group, for example, was that it did work across government to deliver. We've seen from Economic Recovery Group how we can enhance our working, but also one recognises with numbers of departments and ministers that you do continue to get this silo mentality. So if we're not prepared to address it, we're not prepared to find different ways of working, then we're just going to carry on, despite the warm words, we're just going to carry on delivering the same old government time and time again, and it doesn't really matter who is delivering the best verbalisation in terms of the warmth that you believe are the right policies. We need to ensure that government is delivering, and we can't just carry on delivering with the same structures, because otherwise tradition and history will show us that we continue to end up with the same age-old problems. And that's why when it comes to leadership, we need a collegiate leadership, a listening leadership, one that is prepared to bring people together with the political will to overcome some of these problems and ensure that our delivery on the ground really does make a difference to the lives and problems that our citizens face, but also creates the opportunities for them to succeed in life.
Okay, I think we have a comment from the audience. David Gorn.
Thank you, Richard. I'm very encouraged by the responses to both candidates from that question from Neil, and also by the commitment which has been given to involve, if you like, more cohesively the community and to bring people in to support government. Some years ago, we formed the Manx Economic Development Forum, which brought together the unions, government and the third sector to discuss and debate matters of mutual interest. That, for whatever reason, was discontinued. It strikes me that what Minister Cannan has just been describing and what is set out in the Chief Minister Community and Engagement Report echoes that and emphasises the need for the third sector to have more voice directly into the heart of government, which has been lacking. And if we are to bring that tremendous input from the third sector into this to push forward the poverty report and other issues such as the current climate situation with fuel, etc., then it's imperative that we have something similar to that introduced at an early date, and I would welcome the candidates' observations on that.
I'll come back, David, and say absolutely a commitment across government. But it's not just engaging with the third sector, it's engaging with business and industry. It's engaging with the right people who can help us with our infrastructure delivery. The point is, time and time again, we've set up forums that have been talking shops effectively. and haven't really got down to the heart of the issues or delivered. I think we need honest conversations. We do need to have those forums to discuss the issue of the day, but we also need to be honest in terms of what we can deliver both as a government from the facilities we have, what the third sector in this instance can deliver, and what is our financial availability. We have a wide range, a disparate range of financial commitments across our society. We've got to be a responsible government, but at the same time we need to be liaising and working with people and a listening government to achieve it. So if we set up forums, if we set up engagements, if we set up that third sector engagement, then we need to make sure that we're not just talking, but we're also being honest with each other and finding ways to properly deliver for our people.
I need to move on, but just a quick response, Dr. Allinson.
Who's going to disagree with that? Yes, we need to listen, we need to get the best advice from the people who are at the coalface, and we need to act on that. But also we need to invest in the future of this country. Whatever comes out of the election on Tuesday, the next administration must use the reserves that we have for the right outcomes for our people. The time of trying to constantly add to reserves at a time of economic crisis, at a time of poverty, at a time of hunger, at a time of fuel shortages is wrong. We have to invest in our nation, we have to invest in the people, and we have to get the outcomes that everyone agrees are priorities.
Thank you. I just want to move on now to another subject, and this is another question from the audience. And this is a question from Jed Power, who's a business owner. Jed, your question, please.
Thank you. Whilst being established members of Comin, it must have been frustrating to see the performance of the Department of Infrastructure fail on so many levels over the last few years. And we can talk about the landing stage, we can talk about the promenade, we can talk about a bus and rail service that appears to be unaccountable and out of control. Could you please share with us what your frustrations were as this was happening and how you weren't able to perhaps make change whilst you were in government? It just seemed to be like a runaway train.
Thank you, Jed. Dr. Allinson?
I'll start off with that because obviously I came into Comin just over 18 months ago, and at the time the prom was still kicking off. It was only later that we found out about the Liverpool landing stage. When you do the eventual autopsy on those jobs, you'd have to look at right at the start the tendering process, the costing process, the timescales that were involved. Were those realistic at the first point, or were they set up to fail? Right from the beginning. And I'd probably advocate that some of the schemes were priced far too low, were priced unrealistic, and were far too complex. The other aspect is the DOI structure itself, and I'm not here to bash a department or a minister or a CEO, but the DOI, what they're expected to do ranges from running a steam train to dealing with an international project over in Liverpool for a ferry landing. We need to be absolutely certain that DOI have the resources and actually have the acumen to provide these services and provide these outcomes. I don't think they do. I think what we need with the DOI, and we've had a report looking at the structure and function of it, is to actually create operational units in it. So one will do transport, one will do highways, that we will have accountability just for making sure that the potholes aren't there, that we have accountability for a transport system that works for our visitor community, but also look at the way we deal with major projects. And so we need a major projects unit that takes the best out of DOI, the best out of Treasury, and runs with some of these big infrastructure projects. We do have a capital budget, but that's been underspent for years. The last time, over the last year, I think it was about 40% of the total capital budget was spent, as opposed to an anticipated 55%. If we're going to put that money into the economy, if we're going to put that money to provide services and facilities for our people, we have to be a lot smarter about how we do it. And that will often need off-island expertise to come in, particularly in terms of construction, but also need that accountability and actually having a sector that can provide that in the right way.
Cannan, we could probably do a whole programme on DOI.
Well, you could, but one recognises there are fundamental and serious issues at stake here. And these units do exist. We do have a housing unit within the DOI. We do have a transport unit. What we actually need to do is really consider bringing those units out from the DOI, producing much more focused and targeted government, and around that setting clear policy priorities. The infrastructure department has failed in terms of the way I think it's set about planning some of these key projects. I don't think there's been enough challenge or scrutiny or expertise involved at an early stage. And I think what ministers and MHKs have been told doesn't always stack up. But we don't understand that or necessarily know that. That's why I'm saying in my manifesto, there is skills and experience in this community who have the ability to sit alongside MHKs at a senior level and challenge what is being sold to them, whether that is people with skills and expertise in civil engineering, in legal contracts, in transport, in railways. These types of individuals, we should not be afraid of sitting them alongside MHKs in an open and transparent manner under the right framework in order to challenge what we are being told. And in 2019, I recognised that some of these projects were seriously going astray, and that's why I went public with my concerns that we needed to create a proper projects unit with the skills and expertise to ensure that we were challenging what we were being told, the costings, but also the delivery mechanism as well. So significant improvements being needed. I'm going to work with my colleagues, if elected, to understand how they want to see the DOI reshaped. Certainly my commitments to bring out housing and local authorities. I'd also like to see transport brought out into the daylight, more scrutiny being applied, but better than that, Jed, we need to ensure that what is being planned is absolutely spot on and, as we say, on the money before we actually start putting spades in the ground, because that's an area where I feel that we are seriously lacking at the moment.
Thank you. Jed, any further comment? No? Okay. Thank you. We shall move on. This is a related topic, I think, because it involves impact on businesses who've been on the promenade. And so our next question is from Andy Saunders, who's the owner-proprietor of Quids Inn.
Yes, but I'm more here to represent the hospitality industry as a whole. I'd like to ask both of you, you've both spoken about our small to medium businesses and how much of a backbone they are to our economy. Our GDP spend was considerably less than the similar jurisdictions like Jersey and Guernsey on support for our customer-facing industries, and more than 10 times less than the spending in the UK throughout the pandemic. Would you address that as you come into your new administration? How would you address it? Would you, for example, revisit the PwC report into hospitality and its findings? And would you commit to keep reviewing your spending and the support packages for these businesses as we rebuild, because they are the heart and soul of our communities, and we need to make sure that they survive and help us to revitalise our towns and our areas around?
Thank you, Andy. Alex Allinson?
Yeah, I thank you for your question. I mean, I was surprised by the reaction to the PwC report and the way it was, the results of it were perhaps undermined in terms of the importance of small and medium-sized businesses on the Isle of Man. They not only employ a large number of people, they are part of the package we've been talking about to attract people over here. People want to be able to go around Douglas, go out for a pint, go out for a nice meal, have that nightlife economy. Without that, we're not going to attract all the people we've said that we need to come here. We're not going to recruit graduates to stay here either. So I think it's inherent that sector is nurtured. In terms of how you do that, again, there are a whole range of different ways you can do it. Part of it is looking at rents, part of it is looking at the training support, some of the work that's been done in terms of licence premises, and the new licensing act that comes in hopefully should reduce some of the overheads and allow more creative ways of actually developing the licensees and how they can work in new ways to develop new offerings, whether that be pop-up bars and things like that, in addition to the premises you already own. But also we have to actually make sure that the wages of those people are supported as well, and that people working in hospitality actually get the jobs they need, but also the training, the support they need from government.
Thank you. Alf Cannan?
Well, I don't know, you quoted a lot of figures at the beginning. I'm not aware of the analysis that you've undertaken in terms of benchmarking our support, but what I have benchmarked in terms of what we've delivered, I think we've delivered in terms of salary support, in terms of MIRA, in terms of the business schemes that we have delivered have been as comparable and as good as any across any jurisdiction, and we've delivered over £130 million worth of support into businesses across our community, primarily in the domestic sector, supporting jobs and families and those businesses for the future. And I've said in my manifesto that we are going to have to keep on monitoring the position in terms of the COVID impact, and that we're going to need to do so throughout the winter because there are going to be challenging issues afoot. But we also got to deliver any support that's coming through to particular businesses on a fair and equal basis in a proper manner that does not unduly or unfairly influence other businesses, and we've also got to balance that out with the availability of our budgets as well. Andy, my commitment will be, from a government perspective, is to continue liaising with businesses through this difficult period that we have. I want to get us through, I think, until the end of spring next year, and I'm hoping that we're going to have a glorious summer where COVID restrictions really have, I hope at that point, all but disappeared. And I also want to commit, I hope, or find some agreement amongst the future Tynwald / Council of Ministers in terms of what we can do and build for the future. And that's why an initiative such as a year of sport, potentially, which I've suggested in the manifesto, is a fantastic way to help you rebuild your businesses. It's not just about the support mechanisms that are going to be in place, but it's also about government's future plans, particularly in your industry, around our tourism industry and our tourism plans for the future, which are going to give you hope and other business men and women hope as you plan and look as to how you might develop and grow your businesses into the future.
Thank you. I'm glad you touched on tourism there, Mr. Cannan. I've got some research here which is actually taken directly from Visit Isle of Man's website, which demonstrates that from research which was published last month, the Isle of Man is the least considered British Isles destination for a short break or holiday. That ain't great. Yeah, and there's so how do we rectify that?
There's a whole range of reasons for that. I mean, the first question is why. A lot of it is connectivity. So one of the things that we need to do now that we have basically government ownership of the steam packet company is use that tool to actually attract visitors here. We also need to review the open skies policy that we've got on the background of the seismic change in aviation to guarantee those key routes we need both economically and for tourism, to guarantee that we have the ability for people to come and go to and from the Isle of Man, whether they be residents or tourists, in an affordable and accessible way. We don't have that at the moment. We're reliant upon one flight a day into Gatwick. I don't think that's enough, and the price of it, if you book within a couple of days, can be exorbitant. I'm not surprised that people are put off coming to us by either sea or plane when they can drive up a motorway to the Lake District. So it is about connectivity, but it's also about when they get here, we have the offering, we have the vibrant night culture, we have events to attract them here. And I think we do, but we need to invigorate that tourism industry to actually not just provide functions and facilities for people coming across, but also the people who live on the island as well.
Thank you. Alf Cannan?
Well, we certainly need to pay very, very close attention. Whatever the outcome from this economic strategy that we are producing, there will absolutely be a clear need to focus on our visitor economy, which does so much for so many people on this island. One of the issues that I've got broadly across government is this issue of accountability and delivery. Again, I would like to liaise with my Council of Ministers, potentially if elected, and also with Tynwald as to whether actually we could create a standalone agency or board again for tourism to bring much more transparency around that decision-making process and target them with increasing the numbers of tourists coming to the island. I don't think subsidising state subsidies of airlines or boats are necessarily going to be the right way to address this. I think we need to be focusing in terms of ensuring that we've got the right facilities on the island, that we've got the right quality in terms of our hotels and accommodation sector, but also that we are actually offering what I perceive to be the right environment in terms of ensuring that there are the right activities, that we're encouraging the local businesses that will appeal to tourists, such as cycling and walking, in terms of our sporting facilities as well. So there's a whole range of things that can be done, but we do certainly need to be bringing this out now, more out into the open and more focus in terms of how we are going to deliver that over the next few years.
Thank you. Andy, any further comment or question from you?
I liked the mention of improving wages and so on inside these industries and really reskilling the people in there. And I think it's something that the island should look at, is developing maybe a centre of excellence for this kind of industry, these kind of sectors, where we can bring people to train on the island and learn better skills and so on.
Yeah, I mean, if I can just come to that, I mean, some of the work that's been done at UCM, looking at hospitality skills, looking at catering skills for younger people leaving school has been fantastic. What we need to develop, though, in terms of a lifelong learning strategy, is reskilling people to go back into hospitality rather than coming out of hospitality going into other jobs. And there's some really nice niche markets that we need to explore. You know, croupiers, for instance, there's very few training opportunities for that right across the UK. Not that I necessarily want too many casinos in the Isle of Man, but we can actually use the Isle of Man, the expertise we have at UCM, to allow people to come over here to train and hopefully keep some of them to be employed here.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to move on, and we have a question from Barry Murphy. Barry, your question.
Good evening, thank you. Good evening, Ministers. It's a three-part question, please, so I'm going to read it out. Should Honourable Tynwald members vote in favour of a provisional 27 to 28% increase in gas prices? Please explain why. Should the government consider nationalisation, if necessary, of the supply and provision of gas here on the Isle of Man? And please explain why. And what can be done to help gas customers that are and will continue to struggle with gas bills, particularly through the winter period?
Okay.
I think
Mr. Cannan.
You've asked three parts to that question, Barry. I think the answer to the first part might naturally impact what happens to the second part, but I don't want to prejudge that. I think first and foremost, without prejudging a Tynwald vote, I think the first thing is there's some very serious questions for Manx Gas to answer around the current situation, and particularly I'm going to want to know, as our other Tynwald colleagues are going to want to know, why they have not taken any formal business precautions such as hedging the price of gas. Many other businesses hedge their prices when prices are stable to ensure that they've got a solid business plan in front of them. Manx Utilities, for example, hedges substantial amounts of its gas purchases to ensure that we've got stability when it comes to prices. I want to know why Manx Gas haven't done that. Secondly, I'm also going to want to know what Manx Gas themselves are doing in terms of what pain that they are prepared for, what contingency arrangements they've got in terms of dealing with this type of crisis, and also how they intend to progress matters should the price of gas drop, and how quickly that will be reflected back in their prices. There's a number of commitments there that I think, and questions that need to be answered before Tynwald determine how to vote, and I will want to see that being done. And could you just give me that third part of the question? In terms of support, Barry, yes. I mean, I think that absolutely, first of all, if this price rise goes ahead, I think we've already both committed that there will have to be action from government. I think there's clear policy commitments and levers available to us at the moment in terms of the social welfare support that can be enabled in that respect. And then there's going to have to be a broader conversation about whether government should commit potentially to other mechanisms that might help and protect people from such a substantial price rise. But of course, it's not just on the Isle of Man that we're seeing this kind of leverage. The cost impact, the average cost impact is set at about £200 for 6 months, £400 per annum at the moment, and you can see that price impact, of course, coming across in the UK. So before Tynwald determines its vote, I think we need to get some proper explanation from Manx Gas. But it's not up to the government to bail out businesses. We've seen that in the UK. 9 small energy companies have gone bust in the UK because they have not carried out and didn't have in place the contingency and hadn't hedged. And therefore, politicians are going to have to take a very serious and considered view on the recommendation that is being proposed by the regulator in this instance.
Thank you. Alex Allinson?
Yeah, very, very good question. I must admit, I'm going to be really torn in October when this comes to Tynwald in terms of us agreeing with an independent regulator who have been talking to Manx Gas, proposing a 27.5% increase because of what certainly to me looks like a failed business model of Manx Gas. They've been creating quite a bit of profit for the parent company over many years, over 10% profit. And now suddenly when gas prices go up, because they have not hedged future purchases, they are doing what they've always done, which is pass that extra cost straight onto the customer. I do not think that the Isle of Man government should bail out a company with a failing business plan. In terms of nationalisation, I think that would be the last thing the Isle of Man government would want to do. However, if Manx Gas fails, if the parent group fail to support it, I think government will have to step in. We're in the decent position whereby we already control gas coming onto the island, we control the high pressure networks. What Manx Gas controls is the delivery to the customer. So we could step in, should we need to secure that energy and that heating and power for the people of this island. In terms of the support package, I think that's essential, and I would like, by the time we get to the floor of Tynwald to discuss this in October, a firm commitment from government, a firm message of intent that we will try to support the consumer as much as possible, that any financial package going into energy prices will be for the consumer, not for Manx Gas. How we do that is really difficult because the winter fuel allowance doesn't really touch the number of people being affected by this price rise. And also it will affect different people in different ways according to their circumstances. So it will take time to arrange. It will take time to organise in the same way as Treasury organised things through the pandemic to target those resources when they're really needed. But I think it's imperative that as we go into the winter, we give people the confidence that they can leave their heating on and not have to choose between heating and eating.
Thank you. We are in the closing minutes, so thank you, Barry, for your question. Very quickly, please.
Very quickly, sure. It's not a criticism, actually. It was a very positive answer. The only thing I wanted to say to Minister Cannan, really, is that clearly Cura are in the consultation period right now. And at some stage, I believe maybe January, February next year, they will come back with the results of consultation. And if Tynwald approve the results of the consultation, from that stage Cura becomes more powerful. Its guns are loaded at that stage. So effectively at that point in time, whatever regulation is brought in, they will take over, if you like, from the powers of Tynwald. So it shouldn't be a case that Manx Gas will come back to government at any other stage. Once Cura have powers, they should take over from there. And the only other thing I would say is that gas customers have been waiting for a very, very long time for the 50% share of a promised rebate from 2020 and 2021 to come back. We're now in October, and that money still hasn't come back. And it's a little bit incorrect, I think, or a little bit unfair for gas customers to think they may have to wait much longer for that money to come back. Now is the time to pay that back, please. Thank you.
And Barry, you know, were we a couple of months or a few months further down the line, almost certainly, you know, we would have had regulation in that would have let this decision be that of the regulators alone. As it is now, this is a decision for Tynwald, and we will be making, I would suggest, a very, very important decision in a week or so's time.
Thank you. Thanks, Barry. I just want to fit one more question in, and this is from Josh Sinclair, who's a student. Last question of the night, Josh, no pressure.
Good evening. Do you believe that the election process for the Chief Minister is fair, and do you think that if it's not fair, how would you change it if you were to be Chief Minister?
Thanks, Josh. Alex Allinson?
Yeah, it's the first time I've done this, so do I think it's fair? I think it probably works, but can we make it better? Yes. I mean, one of the arguments is that we should have a directly elected Chief Minister. When you look at, you know, across in the UK, they don't directly elect the Prime Minister there. They tend to be appointed by the party, and then they go forward with their own particular agenda. We don't have party politics here. We have mostly independents, and we have very much consensus politics, and I think that suits us. So how would you actually directly elect a chief minister? I think that'd be really quite difficult. If in 2016 the person with the most votes was chief minister, that would have been me, coming in completely as a newbie without any ministerial experience, without any government experience. It would have been June Watterson, probably for about 3 terms running, which may have been a good thing. I'm not quite sure. I'm not sure June would have liked that responsibility. I think the system we've got works, but what we've seen through Tynwald and what we've seen through our Parliament is a constant evolution. On Tuesday, the Chief Minister will be voted in just by the elected MHKs, not the MLCs. I think that's a positive. I think on Tuesday we'll see obvious voting. It'll be open and transparent. You'll see who votes for who, as opposed to secret ballots. I also hope on Tuesday we get a definitive answer. We don't have to go through constant rounds as well, because we need to hit the ground running. We need stable government. But as we move through the next administration, I think we do need to look again at different ways of electing a chief minister, and different ways of actually having that backing for the chief minister and whatever he or she wants in terms of their council ministers, and how we involve not just the elected members but the whole community in that. I also hope that by our next election we have far more access to things like electronic voting, and we can see how that can widen the participation in representative democracy. Because one of the things that saddened me this election was that the turnout in Ramsey dropped from about 62% down to 53%. We need to do a bit of an analysis, a bit of an autopsy in the election to see why some people didn't turn up and how we can increase people's voting overall, but also invigorate the processes after the general election in terms of choosing the next administration. Thank you.
Thanks. Alf Cannan?
Well, I mean, it is the process that we're currently following at the moment in terms of the House of Keys. It has been refined. It was Tynwald. It's now the House of Keys that is voting in the Chief Minister. And look, you know, what's absolutely important is that a clear manifesto is set out for delivery. Far too often in the past, warm words have come from future Chief Ministers, but no plans have been put in place as to how to improve policy delivery, how to engage more efficiently and effectively with their Tynwald colleagues, and how to properly scrutinise and ensure that scrutiny is delivered. And that's set out in my manifesto. 10 or so years ago, when I became an MHK, the first Chief Minister election I was involved with involved Alan Bell and Peter Cannan, and I don't recall any public debate at all around the election of the Chief Minister. I just think that was a straight vote. It happened very, very quickly from recollection. 2016, there was slightly more public engagement because the Positive Action Group held an open debate, which I think was broadcast on the radio. And now we are undertaking 3 sets of public engagement in the full glare of social media and the ability to engage increasingly with the population of the island. I think there is now a serious question as to whether this should be taken a stage further and that whether actually the public should be trusted. Of course they should be trusted with voting for a mandate and a framework that is put forward by a future Chief Minister. Of course, around that, you'll need to think about what safeguards are in place to prevent a sort of dictatorship emerging. But I think this is a discussion that should be had in the next couple of years. It's really a parliamentary and public discussion that should be had. From my perspective as Chief Minister, it's about delivery and ensuring that I give people, if they're going to vote for me on Tuesday, the confidence that I'm going to deliver a listening, collective leadership that's going to deliver for people on the ground.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Josh, for your question. Perhaps like Strictly Come Dancing, we should come back on Tuesday and do a bit of a results show. I have to speak to the Energy and Studio One teams about that. But we are almost out of time, but before we wrap up, I'd just like to invite each of you to have some final words on why you feel you're the right person to lead the island over the next 5 years. And this time we're going to start with Alf Cannan.
Well, we've heard tonight there are important areas across all sections of society that need to be carefully and considerately addressed over the next 5 years. Economic growth and job creation clearly remain at the forefront of providing us with the security that we need to improve our island home. But alongside that, we must now carefully balance out the need for us to address the global climate change threat whilst maintaining sustainable public finances. Other vital matters include a global tax agenda, the delivery of healthcare across the generations, an urgent need for new affordable housing, and a COVID recovery plan that includes a strong focus on education. Of course, these challenges also present opportunities to make our island more secure and sustainable for the longer term. And there are many opportunities to deliver a greener, cleaner island, opportunities for new technology and enterprise, for tourism and leisure, to develop new markets, to build sustainable towns and villages, and to create a fairer society across the generations. There is, in fact, a decade of opportunity in front of us. But also in setting out a vision for the future, I recognise that words, whilst important, need to be backed up by delivery and sustainable financial plans. That is why it will be vital that at the earliest opportunity, the next government sets out a plan for the island that is focused on targeted delivery of services and accompanied by the appropriate budgetary plan. And of course, this plan needs at its heart a requirement for simplicity and to deliver essential services to a high standard. We must create an environment that we can be proud of and that gives people and businesses the freedom and platforms to succeed. 18 months ago, it fell to me to lead and put together in a matter of days the most comprehensive package of support and state intervention that I think this island has ever seen. The unique packages that we delivered based around salary support, the MIRA, the business support schemes have helped protect and support thousands of jobs across our island. And this vital support package was brought together by cross-government working and by listening to the needs of people and businesses on the ground. I want to bring forward that ethos and draw the very best from the collective will of the politicians to create a better society and a better island. My manifesto describes how a new, more open and transparent style of policy debate, formation and delivery can build a more secure, vibrant and sustainable island for us all. I seek to lead a proactive government that engages across the community, respects opinion and challenges where necessary, and that strives for success. Seek to underpin its vision with thoughtful and impactful policies for a strong, caring and united society, one government, building a secure, vibrant and sustainable future for us all.
Thank you, Alfred Cannan. Now, Dr. Alex Allinson.
Oh, well, first of all, thank you, Richard, and thank you for the audience for coming out tonight. Tomorrow morning, Alf and I will be doing another hustings, and that will be in front of a rather smaller electorate of MHKs. And I suppose in some ways that's the important hustings, because that will allow us to actually picture we have for the next 5 years. I think you've heard today very much a very similar impetus in terms of wanting to do better, wanting to build back, wanting to improve on our society. But people tomorrow, the elected representatives that the people of the Isle of Man have put into power, will have a decision to make between very much the agenda that's set out. I am here to try to get a socially progressive agenda set out, to try to break the mould of Manx politics, not only in the way it invests in the people of the Isle of Man. It invests in infrastructure, it deals with intergenerational fairness, it deals with climate change, but also to make sure that we heal some of the rifts we've had within Tynwald. Over the last 18 months, all of us have been dragged apart, and we need to bring people back together, both within Tynwald as a building, so we can have effective government for the people of the Isle of Man, but also to bring people back together who live on this island, to be progressive, to move forward, to not look back, and actually to improve the lives of all the people that live on this island. So whilst I'd like to thank you all for coming tonight, I'd also like to speak directly to those people who vote for myself or Alf on Tuesday. Please read the statements we've written. Please think about what your constituents put you there for. Let's look for progressive change for this island. Let's move forward together and make sure nobody is left behind. Thank you and good night.
Thank you. And thank you both very much for attending this evening, giving us your thoughts and your ideas. It will now be over to the House of Keys, who will vote on Tuesday who they see as their next Chief Minister. Thank you to our studio audience for coming along, and to you at home for watching and sending your comments via Twitter. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.